I live in fear. I live in anger. I live in frustration. And the joy that I used to have living here is diminished. And the future losses, we have no idea what those are going to be. And it's actually very frightening.
This place has a magical feel to it. People that come here say they feel it when they come across the bridge.
Born and raised right here in good old Gold Beach. I've been here all my life. Was a logger. This community was built by loggers and landowners that logged.
Well, it's a place still that you can go to the post office in the morning and gentlemen will tip their hat to you and open your doors. It's old custom style, respectful stuff. It makes you feel like you're part of something.
It's a wonderful eclectic mix of people. Lots of different backgrounds and talents and interests.
Laid back, quiet town. Nice people. Weather's great.
I love it out there. It's like you hear the wind and it's peaceful. And you hear the cows across the road and the donkeys braying, and it's so funny. You hear the chickens early in the morning waking you up. That's a good life, you know. I feel peaceful there. Close to nature, close to God, as far as I'm concerned.
I've lived here all my life. It's a beautiful place to live. So, yeah, I wouldn't want to be anywhere else.
Most of you don't know what our story is about. On October 16, 2013, I myself was outside working in my yard, and helicopter kept going over the top of us.
So when I heard the helicopter, I didn't think much of it. But the helicopter was shaking the windows and rattling my doors.
One of my boys was outside. The kids were already excited because my little boys love helicopters. And it had flown over about every 20 minutes over our place. It probably went 4 or 5 times. Different directions. It didn't follow the same path.
And then I could see the spray bars at the side. I could see where he was headed in the ridge. He was spraying on back and forth.
My son came in and he says, I think that helicopter sprayed something because it smells horrible and my throat hurts.
And smelled this awful smell and, didn't know what was going on.
I was hit immediately from stepping outside. I couldn't hardly breathe. My eyes were watering. My sinuses were burning. I had a terrible headache. I got a rash on my arms.
My daughter, who's 16, came home from school and her face was itchy and red. Her eyes were burning. Her throat was sore. She said she, felt ill. My daughter's vision was kind of blurry after that. Apparently there were lots of kids at the high school that didn't feel well.
Been finding the neighbors lots of dead deer still, dead elk, dead cougar, just up the hill from us towards the spray area.
Everything I have learned about these different chemicals that they're teaching me in college, that bladder cancer can be directly related to herbicidal poisoning in your water.
My concern is, are these chemicals still in me? And especially the possible long-term effects of this in my little kids.
As a mother, I would be worried about my children being exposed to these toxins. For other mothers, I could see where they would be very fearful. I mean, pregnant women, we have no idea what's going to happen to us in the future. Those chemicals would have been directly deposited into our Rogue River, which is also a fish-bearing salmon stream.
So I called in to report that my daughter had been exposed and that she was ill. And so I started calling the Department of Agriculture and the health authority.
Guy asked me, well, can you think of anything that might have caused this? I said, well, we got sprayed on. Whoop, I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it. We're not going to talk about that. That never happened. Just forget about it. And that's about as far as I got with them.
People are dying down here. We need a voice. You guys cannot keep doing this to us. And they said, Department of Ag told me, well, Ms. Aldrich, what did they spray? I said, that's what I don't know. That's what we need to know. She says, we'll call back when you do.
Tried to call the Department of Agriculture, Poison Control, Health Department, everybody they could think of. Nobody wanted to really pay any attention to us. About a week, and they finally decided to come down and take some samples. About 10 days later, but it had been raining all the time, so it washed a lot of the stuff off, and they only took leaf collections and things like that. They didn't take any soil samples, any water samples. We wanted CDC to come in and possibly take some blood samples and urine samples, but they wouldn't do that.
People start talking to each other and they realize that what they thought were isolated individual things that they thought were unique to themselves are actually happening across a community.
So this is my community. I feel like this is extended family. And so when I see a bunch of our children being affected negatively by this, it makes me really angry.
I stayed to myself until this all took place. And I didn't even know half my neighbors around here. And I thought that was okay, because, I like to have my space and not be bothered. Now that we've gotten together and got to know each other, trying to work this thing out, kind of have our own support system. If anybody gets really sick, take care of them and help them out what we can.
When I came here, it was kind of the tail end of an environmental movement to end aerial spraying on federal forest land. And so there were no spray signs up all over the place, and apparently the federal government recognized the health hazards of aerial spraying of pesticides on forest lands and so banned that practice. And I think most people thought that it just went away.
I hadn't been sprayed. It wasn't personal at that point. I wasn't sick at that point. I didn't understand what the laws were. I didn't understand that there was only a 60-foot buffer zone on a fish-bearing stream, but they could spray any. I didn't even realize that they were spraying around us, to be perfectly honest. I knew spray issues happen. It doesn't happen to me.
They got buffer zones around their waterways and their home sites, and the state of Oregon don't. Washington, Idaho, California, all of them have a buffer zone. And they have no serious complaints anymore.
So even though the federal government recognizes the health hazards, they don't have any jurisdiction over state and private lands.
See, now they're trying to say, well, we are an isolated case. That's how they're trying to get around this. This was just a one-time pilot error, and so therefore they don't want to do the buffer zones.
We're not fabricating nothing, so we don't have to worry about what we've said. Do we have to cover? Do we got to watch? Da da da. We're telling the God honest truth, so it doesn't matter if I tell it one time. If it will affect a life, I will tell it 1,000 times. And you're not going to catch us off guard on something because we're telling you the truth. We're telling you what we've lived here.
You can make change, but it takes a lot of people and a lot of proof.
So the idea of the burden of proof is that often for these communities, they have to show that there's something wrong, that it's not, maybe we have the idea that in fact agencies that are out there to protect the public health are just, they're going to take care of it. But in reality, that's not how things happen.
What is amazing to me is that these chemical companies and the timber companies will tell you, no, they're not dangerous. They will not hurt you. How can they say that when we have documented proof?
We can't really even go to litigate against it because if we go up against these big guys with deep pockets, if we are found not to win, then we have to pay their attorneys.
You know, we have the work, we have a family, you know, we don't have the resources to really combat the issue.
I feel it inside that something's going to have to change. Something is changing. Something's already in the making.
The Oregon Forest Practices Act was created back in the 1970s, and at the time it was considered really good policy. But since then, Oregon has fallen behind, and other states have moved forward to add science to their forest policies and to create more protections for drinking water, wildlife, and human health.
That's why we're trying to get these laws changed. We feel that it's a violation of our constitutional rights.
For our situation specifically, I mean, at the very least, notification before spray.
To state exactly what they're going to use.
Get some accountability.
I want to see a buffer zone in the state of Oregon over all waterways and every structure.
To me, there's a moral impact here. I don't believe it's moral to cause harm to somebody else like that.
I think about the children. And, you know, if I'm too old, it doesn't matter about me. What I'm worried about is the laws that are going to keep affecting those after me, and that's the children.
If you have a cause and you believe in it, I think it's really important you young people get in there and understand it and figure out how to make some changes. It's not going to help me, it's not going to help Clinton, but your age group and your children, grandchildren, it will help. And it does make a difference.
We're now connected with like 11 counties.
Tillamook County, Lincoln, Lane, Curry, Douglas, Coos, Josephine, Marion, Clatsop, Columbia, and Klamath.
You're not just dealing with chemicals in your area. You're dealing with chemicals that go from state to state. We're talking about now our whole entire environment.
Once it's on the ground, fog, rain, causes that chemical to come up out of the ground and mix with the water. And if there's any wind or anything that can move that water around, it turns to gases, and it can spread up to 10 miles from the actual site that it was dropped.
Here's another problem. They spray every spring and fall. So 2 times a year and up to 3 to 5 years. that they'll do this. So we're stuck with this volatilization for the next 3-4 years more.
They're poisoning the woods. All that stuff's going into the streams and going down into our river, and it's got to be affecting everything in between.
People need to be responsible for their own actions. Because I think it's important to think things through instead of being careless. Because a man died, a dog died, my cat's almost died. A lot of things happen. It's a big rippling effect. And we are all connected as humans, and we need to stop and remember that. I feel kind of like we're just a little town, little one-horse town, and nobody really thought we were important. And we are important. Anyone that's ever been here knows it's important.
If you sit and talk to any person, they would feel the compassion. How could you not as a human being? So I think that just public awareness and getting it out, and enough people, it could be turned around. And it needs to be turned around.
We aren't tree huggers or anything else. We love our environment. We want to see things healthy. And be it getting a clam off the beach or a crab out of the ocean or a fish out of the river, we want it all to be healthy. That's why we live here.
And we're not against logging by any means.
I mean, you can do it in the right way. I ain't against reforestation. If you're going to log, you better reforest it. Just, they need to go about it safer.
We hope and pray that someday that he can get well and go back.
And logging and forestry is a large part of the economy, and it's not a bad thing. But I think when people get so focused on profits and they forget everything else, they've forgotten the other two legs of the sustainability equation, and that's people and the environment.